Hi and welcome again. Today I'm going to show you how to make my neck lanyard. This is my own design and it's become quite popular. It includes a variety of different hardware and knotting and braiding techniques, and I'm going to try to show you all the project from start to finish. Down here I have a metal thimble like this. And a key ring, and here are a number of snake knots and your choice of bead. And up here behind the knot I use a shrink tube to keep everything together, and then I cover that with a gaucho interweave knot, and all the way through the neck loop is a 4-strand round braid. You also need a couple of clasps like that, scissors and a jet lighter. And a jig, if you have a jig, to put it all, to mount it all when you do the weaving, it makes it easier. So let's go. First, to make the core, the inside of all this that you're then going to braid around, we use a 3.5 meter black Paracord 550 normal cord. So take the end and mount your thimble, depending on the kind of thimble you are going to use. You can use different techniques to fasten it. My thimble has a few loops that I need to pass through, so I need to use my tool to get it through. Like that, and then I'm going to place it in the middle of my 3-meter cord. Somewhere around here is the middle. Like that, and then you attach it with a snake knot like this, going first over with the first cord and then over and through with the second one, and put this first snake knot as close to the thimble as you can and tighten it as tight as you can. That's gonna keep the thimble in place. If you have a different thimble, you could also put 1 drop of super glue there to keep the thimble in place. And now you're going to continue with other snake knots above here, but you want this thickness. So I'm going to do it with 2 separate cords and weave it around the core instead of around itself like that. So I'm going to weave the snake knots around those 2 core cords. So I cut another 2, maybe 50 centimeter strands of the same paracord. My necklace here is going to be all black, right? I put 1 in the front and 1 in the back of the core, and then start doing my snake knots. So take the first working end and go around, and then the second one around and through the loop that you created with the first one. If you need a more, there are specific instructional videos of each knot. If you find it difficult in this one, you can search on YouTube for snake knot tutorial. But it's an easy knot. Here you just have to tighten it really well around the 2 cores. You can see you can do it in 2 colors if you want to, but I've chosen 2 cords of the same color, so it's going to be all black. And I do maybe 10 to 12 of these knots, depending on the length you want on that lower part. So around, and then around again, and through the loop. And tighten it. I'm gonna speed the video up a bit now. You just continue with the snake knots until you have the length that you want. A few more. So like that maybe. I think I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, like 12, 13 knots. And then I loosen the first one I did because that one is never very good. So I'll remove that knot and then I cut and cinch the ends both on the lower and upper side of this row of snake knots. And be very careful when you cinch them so you don't damage the core cords. And then when you've cinched these two, you can move the whole row of knots down towards the thimble by pulling these strands like that. So you push the whole row of knots down towards the thimble and then cut the other ends like this. Cut close, but be careful when you cinch them with a lighter, as always. That's why it's always better with a jet lighter than a normal lighter, because of the precision. There you go, and then you mount your bead on top here. So more or less like this is the one part of the lanyard. And now we move towards the neck loop of the lanyard. All this part is we're going to cover it with braids. You will need 4 2.5 meter strands of flat paracord, coreless paracord, with the inner strands removed. But first I take my piece of shrink tube and mount it again close to the bead. I put both of the cords through the piece of shrink tube like that, and then I can do this loop the size I want using these cords. So it will be a core made of 2 strands, double strands, so to speak, by putting the ends again through the shrink tube. Like this. And this is the point where I can measure the neck loop to the size I want. I can put this around my neck and just make sure that it's gonna be exactly the size of the neck loop that I want. Like this. And once I'm done with my sort of basic shape of the whole lanyard, then it's time to start weaving. I have these 4 strands, And I want to put all of these 4 strands on top of the core strands that I'm going to weave around. 2 on each side. By putting them also through the shrink tube. Each of these strands is like 250, 260, 260 centimeters more or less. I'm going to put 2 like this on top of the cores. And then the other 2 on top of those 2. But everything will go through the shrink tube like this. So they cross over. That's a good starting point when we are going to weave later on. Just like that. Pulling them through 5-10 centimeters. Like that. So now they are put in a cross. 2 on top of the other 2. And I'm going to use this clasp to keep them in place. And now I'll mount my jig like this and put the whole setup around my jig so that I get some space to weave. If you don't have a jig, you can invent some other contraption so that you can mount your cords and get some space to weave. You will see the way that I set them up, but it doesn't have to be like that. So I take the loop and put it on both ends of my jig, like this. And then I adjust it so the cords are tense enough. I move the starting point up a little bit, also just to make it easier to start weaving. Like this. So I can weave around the whole thing. And then I make sure to have 2 strands on each side, like this. And those strands are going to stay on the same side always. And then you take this one and go below, under, and up between the 2 strands on the other side. And then back again towards the side where you came from, but below the second cord on that side. Okay? So now this one that was above is below. And then it's from the other side, the uppermost strand on the left side. You go underneath and under the core, between the 2 strands, working strands on the right hand side, and back to the left side. Now take the upper right strand, underneath, around and through, up between the 2 cords, and back on the right side. So you get this crisscross pattern in the middle. Again now from the left, underneath and up between the 2 right hand strands and back to the left side. Underneath, between and back to the right with this one. Your right hand strands always stays to the right, and your left side strands always stay on the left. And you always take the one that is the uppermost strand. Left, right, left, right, left, right. That's the whole weaving process. And you do this weave until you covered the whole neck loop of your lanyard. And every now and then you will have to push your weave up towards the shrink tube to get the weave tighter, and then continue to weave. So once you have about 10 centimeter, you push the knot upwards like this. Then you continue to weave again. When you get as close to the shrink tube as you possibly can, then you will try one last time to push your whole weave upwards like this, and maybe even follow through a little bit and push it backwards from a little bit more of the beginning of your weave, like this. I'm doing this because I will need to loosen the weave a little bit at the end. So it's good to have it really pushed up like this before you finish the weave and start cutting the cords. So now I got some extra space to weave, as you can see. And my 4-strand weave is now really tight. This pattern looks really nice if you do it in 2 colors, but the customer that ordered this one wanted it in only black. So I weave as far as I can to get as close as I can to the shrink tube or the bead, where we will pass through these 4 ends as well through the same shrink tube. So now I'm done, and I'm going to loosen the lanyard from my jig and remove the jig. Now our task is to get these 4 ends through the shrink tube as well, where they will be attached. And to do that, I will use my brass fids, the needles. You don't have to use them, they are optional of course, but it makes this kind of work so much easier. So one by one, I'll pull the working strands through the shrink tube. Like that, and make sure there are no twists and turns of the cords. You don't want a big bulk here. It should be and look as round as possible, following the pattern of the weave if it's possible. Like this. And then you can push the knots downwards so that your weave is as close to the bead and shrink tube as possible, and then even out the weave around the neck loop. You can do that later as well, but you need to get all the weave down as far as possible, and then you pull on the working ends to even out whatever cord is left. This is sort of the tricky part, to make it look nice, and position the shrink tube above the ends, or above the start of the weave, better said, right? So now I'm quite satisfied. It looks nice now. So now I can cut away the excess cord. Remember, there are now 8 flat strands of cord and 2 strands of normal cord sticking out here that I need to cut. Like that. Try to position it as I want it now. Now the next step is to heat the shrink tube. And my shrink tube has glue inside, so that will help everything stick together down here. So when you heat it, it shrinks and the glue gets heated up, so everything will stick together nicely. You can shape the shrink tube also with some tools, metal tools, so you don't burn your fingers. Try to avoid cords sticking out and shape it so it looks nice. And then the last part of this project is to cover the shrink tube part with a gaucho interweave knot. We're going to cover this part with the gaucho interweave knot. So for that you need maybe 1 meter of flat cord and the fid, the needle. So start by attaching the end across the lanyard like this. You can use a rubber band or tape or whatever. Then you go around and across the cord like that. And then again around on the back and across towards the front. Then you take your needle or your fid and you go under and over. And then you come around to the other side again. And here you will go beside the standing end, you will go under and over. Come around to the other side, you enter the knot again with an over, under in the middle, and over the last cord like that. Come around again, and you go over, under, and over. Over, under, and over, that last one there. Enter the knot with an under this time. You go over 1, under 1, and over 2, exiting the knot with an over 2. And here we have the Turk's head knot. Now for the interweave, you pass over the standing end and go under 1 on the left hand side of the standing end, over 1, under 1, and over 2. You go into the knot again with an under 1, over 1 and under 2, and exit with over 2. Now going in again with an under 1, over 1, under 2, and over 2. coming in with an under one, over two, under two, and over two. And coming in, I'll remove the clasp here. And coming in again with an under one, over two, under two, and exit with an over two. And now for the last pass, we go under two, and that's when you know you're finishing. Over two, under two, and over two. So it's two all the way, splitting pairs all the way, exiting with an over two. And now, whilst the knot is still quite loose, you can move it to place it as you wish. Turn it around so the entrance and exit of the working ends is on the back. And then take the needle and go right behind all the cords and out on the other side, all through the knot. And that's finishing up the knot. Now we only need to tighten this knot, starting from the standing end here, and just little by little pulling out the slack. Don't try to pull everything at once, because then you'll ruin the symmetry of the knot. Little by little, going through the knot, pulling out the slack. I usually do this 3 times on a knot like this to get it really nice and tight. Just pass through the knot like this. And I'll speed up here because it's not so interesting to see. And now just pulling out the final slack, tightening up the knot, and we're basically done. Cut these ends nice and close without damaging the knot. Same here. And cinch it a little bit just so the knot won't unravel. And that's it. Good work. Thanks for following all this project from start to finish. I hope your result is good. Please post your results on your Instagram or whatever and tag me. I'll be happy to see your products. Thanks for watching. I hope you found it useful.